You are Locked On Pistons POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Detroit, on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What a frustrating game this was. Sorry to scare everybody to begin. Welcome into a live Locked On Pistons POSTCAST. I am your host, Jake Riepma. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Riepma. And this is the Locked On Pistons POSTCAST. We're going to talk about the inconsistent effort from the Pistons tonight that allowed the Atlanta Hawks to end an 8-game losing streak. That's right. The Hawks had lost 8 in a row entering this one. They win at 132-130. We'll also go over Trae Young, who was a huge problem for the Detroit Pistons tonight, culminating with a dagger buzzer beater, and wrap it up with our studs and duds. So come along. That's all next on the live Locked On Pistons POSTCAST, your post-game destination for all things Detroit Pistons, right here on Locked On Sports Detroit. Make sure you subscribe. And as always, we thank you for making us your post-game destination, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Don't forget, your favorite podcast has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Pistons daily newsletter. It's your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage, and it's delivered right to your inbox. If you haven't signed up by now, what the heck are you waiting for? It's free. LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. This episode of the Locked On Pistons POSTCAST is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now let's get into it. As always, your comments are welcome, and maybe we'll work backwards and go over the end of the game where the Pistons actually showed some life in that fourth quarter, erased a double-digit lead for the Hawks, and it was as compelling of a game down the stretch as you will get, but it should have never been that close of a game. I mean, the Hawks were down 3 starters. They were banged up. They were on an 8-game losing streak, and the Pistons playing really good. And save me, please save me the tiresome narrative of second night of a back-to-back. Listen, both games were at home. You sleep in your own bed. This is the National Basketball Association. I know the FanDuel Sports Network coverage won't let you watch a Pistons game that's the second night of a back-to-back without reminding you. And then to add a step further, they have to say, well, it was their third game in 4 nights. Oh, the horrors. The troubles of playing basketball. 3 games in 4 nights. Can't even imagine. But the Pistons come out sluggish, and the Hawks build a first half lead, and the third quarter as well. I mean, eventually Detroit outscored the Hawks in that third quarter frame, but man, it was a disappointing night, especially in that second quarter, with the Hawks putting on a little run and outscoring the Pistons 39-29. But the final stretch, it was pretty compelling. Back and forth they went. Cade had that turn. It was a 129-128 game. Dyson Daniels played really good defense on Cade to force the turnover. Hawks come back. Trae Young splits a pair. And then this was interesting. I liked the strategy. It was about as good as you could get, because there was about, give or take, I want to say 27 seconds or so, 28, when Cade got the basketball down 2 and just went right to the bucket, got as quick of a deuce as you can get, but that still allowed for the Hawks to have about 25, 26 seconds to work with, and they used the entire shot clock, and Trae Young just hits as good of a shot as you will see. The turnaround, it wasn't technically a three-pointer. His foot was on the line, but I mean, it was deep, and it was a high arcing rainbow, that ball in the air. If you were at LCA, let me know in the comments, because I'm sure it felt like one of those times where time just stands still. And I'm curious, Beasley, and it's not like he got worked by Trae Young. Trae Young just made a difficult shot, but was Beasley the best guy to have on Trae Young? I know the Pistons don't necessarily have an elite defender, but Asar Thompson, Ronald Holland, even Cade. I don't know. Beasley's height and wingspan alone just doesn't necessarily make him the most qualified stopper to be on Trae Young, who was phenomenal tonight. And you talk about taking a game over. The guy scored 34 points for the Hawks on 9 of 16 shooting, but he did get to the charity stripe 14 times. That's part of his game. And the Pistons, and he did have 9 assists as well. But all that matters is he had the big shot when it mattered most to end the 8-game losing streak for the Hawks. And for the Pistons, this is one you want to, you got to win these games because it's an inferior opponent. You're trying to stockpile those wins at home in this homestand, and you got the Cleveland Cavaliers coming next, who look what they just did to the Dallas Mavericks, albeit the Mavericks weren't necessarily in the best state to play basketball yesterday afternoon, given some of the things that the idiot Nico Harrison had done. And by some of the things, I mean trading a generational talent at 25 years old, Luka Doncic. But I digress. So that being said, this was a game you look at, and you can't chalk a W on the schedule before you play the game. I'm not saying that, but I don't care about the second night of a back-to-back. You go out and you beat an inferior opponent, and it's just one more example of this team showing some signs of immaturity or needing to continue to progress and continue to grow and mature. And I'm not insinuating that you have to win every game, but this again is a game that had the Pistons been at their best and locked in defensively, JB Bickerstaff talked about that. Isaiah Stewart talked about it. They just were not locked in the opening half defensively, and that's a huge reason why the Pistons lost this game. I mean, the Hawks had 70-plus points at the halftime break, and I know sometimes games are going to turn into a shootout. That's a part of it, but man, that was some – I almost said a bad word. That was some bad defense by the Pistons on display there. And so whether it was being a day late, a dollar short, a step short, whatever it was, the Pistons had that this evening against the Atlanta Hawks. So disappointing because, again, the Hawks were shorthanded. They're on an 8-game losing streak, and the Pistons decided to be the team that lets them get back in the win column. So we'll take your comments. Don't go anywhere. We're just getting started on a live Locked On Pistons postcast. Lots to get into. You'll see I have if you're watching on YouTube, I went with the Tigers hat today because Jack Flaherty is a Detroit Tigers. Is a Detroit Tiger would be a better way to say that. And a 2-year deal for him. Fired up with that. Now just go get Alex Bregman, but pitchers and catchers reporting in a week. Pretty fired up for that. And of course, Locked On Tigers postcasts, which are on the horizon. And as always, remind you to subscribe to Locked On Sports Detroit. But Pistons fall tonight back to the 500 mark. 132-130 the final in this one. After 50 games in the JB Bickerstaff era, the Pistons are 25-25 and 12-12 at home and 13-13 on the road. Just about as 500 as you can get. But hey, we know that's a huge step forward, a huge sign of improvement, but we are certainly not satisfied after lackluster efforts like tonight. Don't go anywhere. The second segment of the live Locked On Pistons postcast, we will chalk it up to how bad of a loss this was, what it means, and we'll take your comments. That's coming up next on a live Locked On Pistons postcast here on Locked On Sports Detroit. This episode of the Locked On Pistons postcast is brought to you by Game Time. That's right. You got to download the Game Time app because it's the best app for buying tickets to a live event. What I love about the Game Time app is it rewards procrastinators like me. If you wait till the last minute, it doesn't matter because as the event gets closer and closer, that price gets lower and lower. Game Time guarantees the lowest price, or if you find a better deal, they'll credit 110% of the difference. That's the peace of mind you get with the Game Time example. And it's not just about sporting events. We're talking concerts. We're talking comedy shows. Whatever it is, the Game Time Picks is the app that does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste any time searching through endless ticket listings. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. And what I also love is the high-resolution photo. You can see the view from your seat within the app, so it takes all the guesswork out of buying it. And don't forget the all-in pricing feature. You got to toggle this feature in the app, but it shows you exactly what you'll pay at checkout. None of those mind games that the other ticketing apps play where you think you're getting a great deal and you go to checkout and it's a fee after fee after fee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On, LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account and redeem the code. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Bummer of a game tonight, albeit a compelling game down the stretch with a couple of lead changes late and a buzzer beater, but for the wrong team, and not technically a buzzer beater. There was still a second on the clock, but the Pistons trying to throw the lob to Tobias Harris, who was better tonight. And that's a bummer with losing a game on the last possession like that. Is there were some good performances from the guys tonight. It just wasn't a consistent effort enough. It wasn't enough of a consistent effort throughout the course of the game, and in particular in that second quarter. Just too many lapses. But you look at the starters, you're never going to complain about a 30-point game for Cade Cunningham. He was plus 10, 14 assists as well, 13 of 13 from the foul line. Loved hearing the crowd chant MVP from the crowd at Little Caesars Arena, although it kind of looked like a sparse crowd. Maybe it was just some of the camera angles I was catching, but kind of fill LCA up a little bit more, I think, when this team, although when they lose to a team that's lost eight straight, who am I to say go see the Detroit Pistons? But no, the rest of the team, I mean, Jalen Duren, again, shooting a high percentage. And if you missed it, I was on AB Spin on Sports with my guy Anthony Bellino this morning talking about the improved play of the Detroit Pistons and what Jalen Duren has meant to this new level of play from the Pistons. And again, I had to admit, I was wrong with some of my criticism of Jalen Duren, although at the time I would say he did deserve the criticism. So a better way to put it, I think he's turned it around and played his best basketball in the calendar year of 2025. Other notes from the box score that jumps out to me, Tobias Harris, I mentioned he was really good tonight, 22 points. He was plus 12, 6 of 7 from the foul line, 8 of 13 from the floor. And he had that really nice defensive play on the cross-court pass from Trae Young that he intercepted and then threw the lob to Asar Thompson. And you really thought it might have been to Holland. Someone double checked me on that. But down the stretch, it was a really nice play that continues when the Pistons were getting a lot of momentum. And it was another example of when the Pistons have turned up the defensive effort, it's there. Because there was another possession where they forced a shot clock violation on a possession that they had to have a stop. And that was late in that game when it was 129-128. So, again, there's examples of this game where you can point to and think, okay, this is a team that is continuing to make improvements, but then there's other examples you can point to and say this is still a team that has a lot of growing up to do, and we saw some signs of immaturity tonight, and whether it be it wasn't overly chippy, but you still get stuff happening. It just seems like every single game from this team. It was Bickerstaff and Trae Young getting into it. And I don't know what Trae Young was saying to JB Bickerstaff and vice versa, but I just think like a lot of times this team just doesn't just go out and play basketball. I mean, yesterday was a good example. It seemed rather, smooth sailing, go out and play basketball and win basketball games. Because in the end, that's all that really matters. Other notes from this one, like I mentioned, Trae Young, 34 points to lead all scorers. He was really good for the Hawks, but all 5 of their starters in double figures, and then 2 guys off the bench with Larry Nance Jr. Dropping 12. He was plus 12, but the guys, the starters, you had every single one of them in double figures because it was a shootout, and the Hawks were just getting a lot of clean looks. And I think when you talk about the Pistons, and JB Bickerstaff talked about that post game, their inability to defend, and it's reflective in the box score. 52% from the floor, 16 made triples. And for the Pistons on the other side, they shot 52% as well, but just 33% from the long line, 9 made triples, and 6 of them were from Malik Beasley, which was a bummer. He started 6 of 8, but missed his last 2 3-pointers. So in the end, it's a victory for the Atlanta Hawks. We do have some comments here that we'll get into, and I mentioned we would. Demetrius McNeil leads us off. How rude. How on earth did the Pistons lose to the Hawks? Team has lost 8 straight and couldn't stop Trae Young. Well, off to the winter games at Traverse City. There you go. There you go. Mary Jo Isaacson checking in. My grandmother, gotta love that. Thought they were going to win. Darn. I did too. And Trae Young hits that dagger. Man, that was unexpected, especially with the way the Pistons played down the stretch defensively, because that's how they got back into the game. And it just goes to show that the defense with this team often dictates what's going to play out. So disappointing loss for the Detroit Pistons. Finally, oh, thank goodness they get an off day tomorrow. These poor guys have had to play 3 basketball games in 4 days. And I know it's easy for me to say sitting in my comfortable wheelie spinny chair as I spin around here and watching the game on the couch. But I think we can all agree that the second night of a back-to-back is just a tired narrative that for whatever reason in the NBA just gets overplayed all the time. And third game in 4 nights, I don't care. Go out and win. That's what you're looking for the Pistons to do, especially when you're playing an inferior team like the Atlanta Hawks. But we'll take one more timeout. Studs and duds are next. I think you know a couple of the studs, but some of the duds might surprise you. Don't go anywhere. Locked On Pistons postcast. Not done yet. Back in a moment on Locked On Sports Detroit. This episode of the Locked On Pistons postcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. You got to download the app because it's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And it is wild when you think about all the possibilities. It's real simple. You pick more or less on a player's projected stat line, and voila, you watch the winnings roll on in. As basketball season is heating up, there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions in award winnings. Prize Picks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money, real cash. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players' projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. You know he's going to do that. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out, my friend. So if you're like me and you're disappointed with the Super Bowl matchup, maybe you got to find a different way to make it exciting. Prize Picks is that way. So check out the promos tab to tally all and any of the Super Bowl Sweet Milky winners, Sweet Millie winners, big game lineups. There you go. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, Pistons lose to the Hawks. Appreciate everybody hopping on a live Locked On Pistons postcast. Although I'm no stranger to the metrics. When the Pistons lose, nobody watches because we're all too upset, and that's okay. I understand, but when they win, appreciate everybody hopping on. And we're getting closer and closer to that goal of 2,000 subscribers on Locked On Sports Detroit. And maybe you're a baseball fan looking for a post-game show. Don't worry, we got you covered there. Maybe you're looking for a post-game basketball show. We got you covered there as well. So make sure you subscribe on Locked On Sports Detroit. But studs and duds, we do it every show. It's the wrap-up of the show. You let me know who your stud was, who the dud was, and maybe there's more studs than duds, or maybe there's more duds than studs tonight after a loss to the Atlanta Hawks, and that's exactly what it is. So, duds for the Pistons. You got to get more from some of those role players. And Simone Fontecchio, just 4 points. He was minus 11. Ron Holland, 6 points, minus 13. He did make a 3, but when you're coming into the game, you look for a lift to give the starters a rest, and there just wasn't there. Marcus Sasser, -12, just 2 points on the night. Malik Beasley, -9. Isaiah Stewart, -9. Everybody from the bench was in plus-minus terms significantly minus tonight. And I know Beasley scored the 18 points and was 6 of 10 from the long line. So certainly he provided an offensive spark, but Pistons got to be better as far as a collective unit on the bench and coming off the bench. So Pistons won the first game of this series back on November 8th, 122-121. They won the second game of the series, 114-104, but they lost this third matchup, 132-130. Final matchup of the season between the Pistons and Hawks, the fourth game of the series, will be on February the 23rd, and that will be in Atlanta. But other studs from tonight, of course, Cade Cunningham, because he's that guy, 30 points plus 10, also had 14 assists, 30 and 14 from your all-star. That's what he does. You'll love to see it. Also, 22 points from Tobias Harris, plus 12, and 8 of 13 from the floor. So an efficient 22 as well. All right. That being said, you want to see the Pistons bounce back, and what an opportunity to do so, to make a statement at home Wednesday night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. That's right. The Cleveland Cavaliers come to town, and the Pistons will be looking to get their revenge, because the last time these two teams played, it was in Cleveland, and Pistons gave them, I wouldn't even say a good run, but 110-91 was the final in that one. And then they went on to lose to the Pacers before playing a really good game against the Mavericks, who are a broken franchise right now, and then beating the Bulls on Sunday as well. So it's been a little bit of a roller coaster as of late, some highs, some lows, but a long NBA season will do that. Tonight, a low, losing to a team that, stop me if you've heard this one before, has lost 8 in a row, or had lost 8 in a row entering this one. But Trae Young gets the buzzer beater to propel the Atlanta Hawks past the Detroit Pistons, and Detroit will look to bounce back Wednesday night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So make sure you join us for that. We'll have a live Locked On Pistons postcast. As always, appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're catching the audio only version on Locked On Pistons, thanks for doing that as well. Don't forget, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter, and you got to sign up for free at lockedondaily.com. It's the Locked On Pistons newsletter, and it's your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage, and it's delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. As always, it's a pleasure to be on the air with you. Pistons lose to the Atlanta Hawks 132-130. Trae Young gets the buzzer beater at the horn, and I guess with 1 second left, but the dagger, how about that? Trae Young gets the dagger, part of his 34-point effort tonight to lead all scorers. And Detroit falls back to the 500 mark, 25-25, 12-12 at home, 13-13 on the road. But they'll continue the homestand Wednesday night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We hope you'll join us for that. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your evening. Have a wonderful whatever you got going. Give it your all. And as always, we appreciate you hopping on. We'll see you Wednesday night after a Locked On Pistons postcast right here on Locked On Sports Detroit. Goodbye.